start recording. All right, Chris, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Albert. Good evening. Thank you for joining Valley Water's virtual public CEQA scoping meeting on the Pacheco Reservoir Expansion Project. I'm Chris Hakes, Valley Water's Deputy Operating Officer for Dam Safety and Capital Delivery Division, and I'm your MC for tonight's virtual meeting. Before we get into our presentation, I would like to turn the floor back over to Albert, who will go over some logistics about the Zoom platform.
Thank you, Chris. I'm going to share my screen here just for a little bit to go over the Zoom platform. Just give me 1 second here. All right. So today we are using the Zoom webinar platform. We are offering our webinar today in Spanish and English. To turn on the Spanish, there's a globe button on your toolbar. Click on that and select Spanish. I'm going to turn the floor over to Jordi to explain that in Spanish.
El día de hoy estamos ofreciendo interpretación en vivo al español y de igual manera hacia el inglés. Durante esta reunión, si desea escuchar la interpretación en español, haga clic en el botón de interpretación en la parte inferior derecha de la pantalla vía Zoom. Verá un icono de un globo. Podrá presionarlo y optar por el idioma de preferencia, español o inglés.
Thank you, Jordi. And Jordi, I'll have you back onto that Spanish channel a little bit here after I finish my screen share. All right, moving on to the Zoom platform itself. If you're hearing us, that's great. If you're not or having issues with your bandwidth, feel free to call in using the number on the screen. You will have an opportunity to ask questions. We recommend you use the Q&A portal. It's a button on the toolbar. You can also raise your hand and ask your question verbally. I will enable your microphone and you will unmute yourself. If you're joining us by phone and want to do the same thing, press *9 to raise your hand and *6 to mute yourself. Please do not be alarmed. I am wearing a mask inside our facilities. Other than that, please do not use the chat box to ask your questions. It will get buried pretty fast and we will have a hard time keeping track of it. Other than that, I'm going to turn the floor back over to Chris and put Jordi in the Spanish channel again.
Thank you, Albert. Now I'd like to provide an overview of today's virtual meeting. You'll hear welcoming remarks from our 3 Valley Water board members, Vice Chair Gary Kremen, and Directors Richard Santos and John Varela, who also comprise Valley Water's Water Storage Exploratory Committee. So all 3 of them comprise our committee. From there, we'll move on to our main presentation, which is divided into 2 segments, the scoping presentation and an open house to follow. The scoping presentation will allow Valley Water to share the latest news about the scope and content of the environmental impact report that we are preparing for the Pacheco Reservoir Expansion Project. We're encouraging members of the public and agencies to provide comments on the scope and content of the EIR, which is the environmental impact report. Comments can be emailed or sent regular mail, and we will provide these details during the presentation on where to email or send those. Following the presentation, you will all have the opportunity to ask questions about what you just saw and the project environmental review process. After the presentation and Q&A, we'll move over to the open house portion of the meeting, where we encourage you to share thoughts and ask more general questions about the project. The goal of the open house is to get your feedback on the overall project and allow the community an opportunity to ask questions and share your opinions. Before we hear from our directors, I'd like to provide a brief update on recent developments regarding the Pacheco Reservoir Expansion Project. In 2017, Valley Water originally applied to receive state funding from the Water Storage Investment Program, also known as the WISP program. In the application, it was mandated that we use 2015 dollars to provide an estimate for the project. At that time, it was $969 million. Due to the projected inflation that affects all projects over time, the estimated cost of the project rose to about $1.3 billion in 2019. That was just to bring it current to the dollars in the current year, and then also to project out to the midpoint of construction. In 2020, Valley Water performed a more detailed design study, which included an updated cost estimate. The design study indicated that construction costs of the proposed project had increased to about $2.5 billion, prompted largely by major changes to the dam spillway design, as driven by some of the foundation discoveries that we had made. Now I would like to introduce the first of 3 board members joining us tonight, Vice Chair Gary Kremen, who is the chair of the Water Storage Exploratory Committee. Welcome, Vice Chair Kremen. The floor is yours.
Hey, thank you, Chris. Good evening, everyone. My name is Gary Kremen. I'm the Vice Chair of the Water District, and I'm the Chair of the Storage Committee. I represent District 7, which stretches all the way down kind of from Stanford along all the way down to Almaden Valley. So thank you for coming tonight and your interest in the Pacheco Pass Reservoir Expansion Project is pretty exciting. So two of our primary partners in this project, we're not doing this alone. We're with San Benito County Water Authority and Pacheco Pass Water District. I'd like to welcome any members of those agencies that are here tonight. Actually, they'll jump on in a little while. I'd also like to thank any representatives of federal, state, and local government here. I believe Carrie Duncan with Congressperson Zoe Lofgren's office is here. So, you know, what's happening here is together with our partners, we were able to secure $484 million, which we don't have to pay back. And we were rated the #1 project from Proposition 1. Thank you, voters. So the reason why we scored the highest is because there's so many public benefits that we're given. #1, an emergency water supply in case of an earthquake, and 55% of our water in our county is imported in. An emergency water supply, that's a big deal because we don't have a lot of storage. #2, environmental benefits for the endangered South Central Coast steelhead. 3, well, there's actually tons of benefits. I don't want to go down the list forever, but the project was conditionally approved in 2018, and we're looking at other ways to reduce the cost and secure additional funding. What's pretty important to us as a board is to be sure we're good stewards of taxpayer and ratepayer money, and doing that while kind of keeping the water supply of our county reliable. So we're trying to do what makes the most fiscal sense and looks out for the folks. So we're looking at some other things in addition, other storage opportunities, recycled water, purified water, and always water conservation. So looking forward to hearing all your comments today, and I'll hand it back to Chris.
Thank you, Director Kremen, or I should say Vice Chair Kremen. Now I'd like to introduce Director Richard Santos, who also sits on the board's Water Storage Exploratory Committee. Please welcome Director Santos.
Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to tonight's scoping meeting. We have a great staff. I, along with the Water Storage Committee, has been working on this for probably 3 years. So I really know the issues, but it's an opportunity tonight for you to ask questions and give us your input. Our job is to make sure that all our residents in Santa Clara County have a reliable source of water. So we're trying the best we can, at the same time trying to save cost, take care of the environment, recreation opportunities, and protect for flooding. It's a difficult job, but it's one that we all like to do, and we want to pass it on to the next generation. So we've done the best we can, but again, your input is very, very important, and I'm looking forward to hearing your comments. Thank you very much. Back to you, Chris.
Thank you, Director Santos. Now I would like to introduce the last member of the Water Storage Exploratory Committee, Director John Varela. Director Varela also represents the district where the project is located, District 1. Please welcome Director Varela.
Thank you, Chris, and good evening, everyone. And I am John Varela, and I represent District 1 on the Board of Directors. And District 1 is from the eastern foothills of Evergreen, Silver Creek, down to the region of Santa Teresa, over the Santa Teresa Hills into the beautiful bucolic Coyote Valley, the open space area of the county, into the communities of Morgan Hill, unincorporated area of San Martin, and of course, Gilroy. So as many of you know, we are off to another dry start this rainfall season. Much of our county is experiencing drought conditions, and we don't know how much more rain we might receive this season. Increasing our ability to store water is vital for the region. The Pacheco Reservoir Expansion Project's goal is to help ensure a reliable supply of water for all our communities in Santa Clara and, of course, San Benito counties. The project aims to reduce the frequency and severity of water shortages during droughts, provide water supply during emergencies, protect infrastructure and enhance groundwater storage and recharge. And of course, improve the habitat for the native steelhead population, a species federally listed as threatened. In the face of climate change and the risk of more prolonged droughts, we must take strategic measures to protect our water supply. Santa Clara County's 2 million residents are counting on Valley Water to ensure we have a safe water supply to support for our population growth and a thriving economy. Thank you. Back to you, Chris.
Thank you, Director Varela. I'd like to thank all three of our Water Storage Exploratory Committee members. They've been working hard on this project and several others. I'd like to turn things over to Ryan McCarter right now, Valley Water's Project Delivery Engineering Unit Manager, who will be presenting the Pacheco Reservoir Expansion Project presentation. After our presentation, there will be an opportunity to address questions regarding the presentation and from our virtual audience. With that said, I now turn it over to Ryan for the presentation.
Thank you, Chris. Pull up the presentation here. Get this going. Okay. All right, the first segment of this presentation will cover the California Environmental Quality Act, also known as the CEQA process, and the purpose of the scoping meeting. The items shown in blue summarize the steps in the CEQA process. The initial study and notice of preparation were released in August 2017, just before the Water Storage Investment Program application was completed. And these documents are posted on our project webpage, which I'll share at the end of the presentation. The first green box on the right indicates where the project currently stands, as the team is beginning to prepare the draft Environmental Impact Report, or EIR. And the second green box notes the actions the team will undertake after public comment on the draft EIR in preparation for the final EIR that is slated for completion in 2023. So the purpose of the scoping meeting at this stage is to provide a public update of the project status, provide an opportunity to receive additional public and agency input, and specifically receive input for the scope and content of the EIR as we begin preparing the draft to be released to the public in 2021. The next segment of this presentation will cover the background of the project. The existing dam on the North Fork of Pacheco Creek forms Pacheco Reservoir, just north of Pacheco Pass Highway, or State Route 152. The approximately 100-foot tall dam was built in 1939 and impounds up to 5,500 acre-feet of water. Pacheco Pass Water District owns and operates the dam and releases water stored in the reservoir into Pacheco Creek to recharge the downstream groundwater aquifers. The groundwater is then pumped to the surface through wells for agricultural use. It's important to note the existing reservoir facility only has the ability to directly divert water into the creek and has no other conveyance capability, such as a pipeline connection to a water supply system. Over the years, many historical evaluations related to the Pacheco Reservoir have been conducted, the most relevant to the current project dating back to the 1990s. California's Proposition 1 of 2014 dedicated $2.7 billion for investments in water storage projects. The Pacheco Reservoir Expansion Project's 2017 application for the Water Storage Investment Program scored highest out of the 8 projects that received eligibility for conditional funding administered by the California Water Commission. The Pacheco Reservoir Expansion Project is related to another project called the San Luis Low Point Improvement Project, being pursued by the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation. The San Luis Reservoir provides storage for both state and federal water contractors, and Valley Water imports about 45% of its annual water supply, and half of that is imported from San Luis Reservoir through a pumping plant and pipeline called the Pacheco Conduit. In dry years, when the reservoir reaches low levels, the intakes for the pumping plant begin to pull in poor quality water near the surface, and the water level can even drop below the intakes to the pumping plant. The San Luis Low Point Improvement Project intends to resolve the issue, and the Pacheco Reservoir Expansion Project is one of the 5 action alternatives identified as its solution. In addition to helping solve the low point problem, the Pacheco Reservoir Expansion Project offers emergency water supply and improves habitat for steelhead in Pacheco Creek. These 2 efforts can come together as a nexus project that can solve an array of deficiencies. The next segment will describe where the project is located and why it provides a unique opportunity to meet multiple objectives. The Pacheco Reservoir is situated in southeast Santa Clara County, just off State Route 152, about 30 minutes east of Gilroy. San Luis Reservoir is located about 8 miles east of the Pacheco Reservoir. After water from the current Pacheco Reservoir is released into Pacheco Creek, it travels about 17 miles to San Felipe Lake before it makes its way into the Pacheco River. As we face future climate change, potential multi-year droughts, and water supply outages due to earthquakes or other disasters, Valley Water recognizes a need to develop solutions to these emergencies. Sorry, I skipped ahead there. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration Office of Marine Fisheries has identified the South Central California coast steelhead as a federally threatened species. The Pacheco River watershed that includes Pacheco Creek has been identified as a critical recovery domain needed for these fish. The primary objectives of the project are to meet the needs previously described. While the primary objectives are considered to have equal importance, the secondary objectives will be pursued to the extent possible without adversely affecting the primary objectives. Project alternatives will be described in the following segment. The project team is looking at various alternatives, including a no project alternative. These alternatives have been formed by investigations, analysis, and coordination with stakeholders and regulatory agencies. All of the action alternatives include a new dam upstream of the existing dam with an expanded reservoir and related facilities, a connection to the existing Pacheco conduit that allows imported water from San Luis Reservoir to be pumped into the expanded reservoir and stored until it is needed, decommissioning and removal of the existing dam along with restoration of the channel between the sites for the new dam, roadway improvements, power transmission upgrades, and construction material borrow source, stockpiling, and staging areas. The variations between the action alternatives include 2 different dam sites, 2 reservoir sizes, and 2 dam types. The alternatives also include variations of the operations after construction. The team has explored 2 dam sites referred to as the upstream and downstream sites. The figure shows the distance relative to Highway 152 and the existing dam. You can see the upstream site would allow for a greater amount of channel restoration between it and the existing dam, which would be new habitat for steelhead and other species. 2 reservoir sizes are being considered as part of the analysis, a 140,000 acre-foot reservoir at each site and a 96,000 acre-foot reservoir at the upstream site. Two different dam types are also being considered in the alternatives. Hard fill, which is a newer technology using rock materials from the site that are mixed with cement and compacted. The strength of this material allows for steeper slopes on the dam faces and a smaller footprint. Also, the emergency spillway and inlet-outlet pipelines can be integrated into the hard fill dam, allowing reservoir overflows to spill over the body of the dam structure through a channel. And the zoned earth fill dam is similar to Valley Water's existing dams that would require separate construction work areas for the spillway and inlet outlet pipelines. The long-term operations variations in the alternatives include 2 flow target scenarios for releases in Pacheco Creek. The original target flow identified for the Water Storage Investment Program application in 2017, and the refined target flows developed over the past few years with input from state and federal resource agencies with consideration of water year type. There are also 2 different participation scenarios in the alternatives for comparison. A scenario without project participation from San Benito County Water District, and another with 10%, which is their maximum anticipated participation. San Benito County Water District is a key partner for this project since their system also directly connects to the Pacheco conduit that delivers imported water from San Luis Reservoir. This table is a summary of the preliminary range of alternatives to be assessed in the draft EIR, which will include a no project alternative as mentioned earlier. Preliminary alternative number 1 represents the original project presented in the initial study and the 2017 Water Storage Investment Program application, while the other alternatives have 1 or more variations to the original project, and these will be covered in greater detail on the subsequent slides. So this is preliminary alternative number 1, as mentioned, very similar to the application and the initial study. There's a close-up of the dam here on the upper right corner, and the expanded reservoir area is shown in blue. The reddish brown area represents the proposed dam footprint. The green lines show the arrangement of the new pipelines and pump station to deliver water in and out of the expanded reservoir. The emergency spillway will be located in the brown area shown. The yellow lines show the roads to access the site and new facilities. And these red lines indicate the proposed power transmission line alignment. And these legend colors are similar for the next alternatives to be presented as well. Alternative number 2 replaces the earth fill dam with the hard fill dam at the downstream site. And as mentioned, this integrates the spillway into the body of the dam, as well as the inlet outlet pipeline arrangement, which significantly reduces the area of ground disturbance. Alternative number 3 being assessed in the draft EIR moves the earth fill dam to the upstream site. The preliminary design utilizes a natural slope over the west abutment for the emergency spillway, which is a favorable characteristic of the site when compared to the earth fill dam at the downstream site. Alternative number 4 has 2 variations from the original concept, with the hard fill dam located at the upstream site. As compared to the previous alternative at the upstream site, the hard fill dam allows a much smaller construction footprint with a spillway and pipeline arrangement integrated within the body of the dam. The last action alternative to be assessed in the EIR is the smaller earth fill dam at the upstream site with a reservoir size of 96,000 acre-feet. In this next segment, we will review the project impacts to be assessed in the EIR. The different activities of the project and their effects can be broken down into 3 areas. The reservoir and work areas that would be directly affected by construction activities and inundation with the expanded reservoir. The downstream areas that would be affected by the changes in water flow release. And water service areas that would be affected by changes in water storage and delivery. Impacts to the physical environments to be assessed include aesthetics, agricultural and forestry resources, air quality, energy, geology and soils, greenhouse gas emissions, hazards and hazardous materials, hydrology and water quality, mineral resources, and wildfire. Impacts to biological resources to be assessed include botanical resources, fisheries and aquatic resources, and terrestrial and other wildlife resources. Impacts to the human environment to be assessed include land use and planning, noise, population and housing, transportation and traffic, public services, utilities and service systems, and recreation. And impacts to cultural resources to be assessed include anything with historic or prehistoric importance. And impacts to tribal cultural resources to be assessed include any sites, places, cultural landscapes, features, sacred places, and any other objects with cultural value to Native American tribes. The last segment of this presentation will describe the process for the additional scoping comment period. One of the primary purposes of the virtual scoping meeting is to solicit input from the public and agencies on the information to be included in the draft EIR. Input may be provided for the range of alternatives, the environmental impacts, and potential mitigation measures. We would like to receive comments by March 12th, 2021 to allow time to consider them as we prepare the draft EIR. In order to be considered, comments must be written and emailed to pachecoexpansion@valleywater.org or mailed to Santa Clara Valley Water District, attention Todd Sexauer, at 5750 Almaden Expressway, San Jose, California, 95118. For additional information, please explore our project page on valleywater.org/Pacheco Expansion. You can find this slide deck and recordings of these presentations and meetings. And any additional questions can be emailed to pachecoexpansion@valleywater.org. Thank you for your time. Back to Chris.
Thank you, Ryan, for the presentation. Now I would like to open it up to receive questions that the audience may have about the project, about the information they just saw right now. You can put your questions in the chat function, although I don't recommend that since they tend to get buried. The Q&A module is a better location for that, or you can raise your hand and we'll let you ask the question verbally. Again, we're happy to address questions related to clarifying the presentation content right now. We ask that you save any broader questions about the project for the open house, which is immediately to follow. Should you have input that you would like us to consider as we prepare the EIR, then please provide written comment to the email addresses just shown. Once we've addressed all your questions about the environmental process, we'll transition to the open house, where we will be happy to answer any additional questions about the Pacheco project. So let's go ahead and transition over to our Q&A. We do have a couple of questions here. First question from Pat is, who is the lead agency on this project? I'm going to go ahead and kick that over to Todd if he's online.
Yes, the lead agency for CEQA on this project is Valley Water.
Thank you, Todd. Next question is from Patrick Ferraro. One of the alternatives of the low point improvement program was ozone treatment at a treatment plant. Do you anticipate that algae will grow in the shallower new Pacheco Reservoir and ozone treatment will be required, plus possibly activated carbon for taste and odor control? If so, will you add this to the cost of the preferred alternative? I'm going to let Ryan take a first stab at answering that, and I may tack on some about some of the treatment processes. Go ahead, Ryan.
Yeah, that's a pretty technical question, and I'd like to defer and get back to to answer it properly. But we have, we know about the alternative at the San Luis Low Point Improvement Project of upgrading the Santa Teresa water treatment plant. And we are studying the water quality at both reservoirs, the existing reservoir and San Luis.
So just to add to Ryan's answer, the theory would be we would take water from San Luis Reservoir when the algae wasn't present, or basically before it started to bloom. Ultimately, with a blend of natural water and imported water inside Pacheco Reservoir, we would imagine that the algal blooms would be under control just through the natural circumstance. However, if there were a treatment option, it would actually be done at our treatment plants, just as it is now. Even when we do have a low point event at San Luis, the treatability of the water becomes more difficult, but it is, for the most part, still treatable. Powder activated carbon is used for taste and odor, as well as ozone. Now, all three of our treatment plants do have ozonation. Our reliability project at Rinconada just incorporated that. So it is possible that a combination of ozonation and powder activated carbon could be used at any of the plants. We have a question from James. What element defines the San Benito County participation? Brian, I'm going to give that one to you.
Yeah, the participation level is cost sharing of the project, as well as storage space in the reservoir. So essentially just carving out that level of participation.
Thank you very much. Looking for any other questions? We don't have anything in the Q&A right now. Does anyone want to be a brave soul and raise their hand so they don't have to listen to me talk? That's always fun for me, but I don't see anyone who's really eager to do that as well. We'll give it a couple more minutes just to see if anyone needs to type anything else. If we want to fill the time with some facts from the reservoir, I think you already said how tall the existing dam is, Ryan, as compared to the new dam. So it is about 3 times taller. Any other pertinent information you think might be nice to hear, Ryan?
I can't think of any off the top of my head. You know, lots of interesting wildlife and, you know, biological resources out there.
Okay, thanks, Ryan. Ooh, I do have a hand raised from Jeff Catania, our project partner from San Benito County. I'm going to ask Jeff to go ahead and unmute himself and speak.
Okay, Chris, can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, great. I just wanted to correct one thing that Ryan stated about our participation in the project. Our participation in the project goes much further than just an economic or funding portion of the project. We're fully supporting the project. We're supporting the project in every way that we can. Every time that there's any presentations or any issues that come up, San Benito is fully supporting the project in any way that we can. I want everybody to understand that even if San Benito was not an active participant in the project as far as storage space, we would still completely support the project. We believe that it's a very good project for the region, and it's something that we feel that needs to be moved forward.
Thank you, Jeff. And indeed, I'd like to say that Jeff and San Benito County, Jeff personally and San Benito County have been big project components all along the way, from the conception of the project through the application period to now. They have been our partner hand in hand. Thank you for breaking the need for me to speak as well, Jeff. You get extra bonus points for that as a good partner. I have a question from George. Where would the water that will be used to fill the new Pacheco Reservoir have otherwise gone? Or put another way, who or what won't now be getting that water? Would that need to be addressed by the EIR? So that's a 2-part question. I'm going to give the first part to Ryan, and I'm going to let the EIR part go to Todd. So Ryan, do you want to start?
Sure. Yeah, the plan is that the reservoir would be able to be filled 2 ways. One from the natural runoff in the watershed as it currently is filled at the existing reservoir. And then also a pipeline connection from the Pacheco conduit. So in other words, our imported water supplies could be stored in Pacheco Reservoir. Now that water, the way the operations are currently planned would be in wet years when there's excess water supply. That would be the main use of filling during those years. We wouldn't be taking away other people's allocations to do that. It'd be our own water through our contract with the Central Valley Project. And then, in other words, the watershed water will be used for downstream releases into Pacheco Creek for the steelhead benefit.
Todd, would you like to chime in on the EIR portion? Will the diversion or collection of water traditionally on Pacheco Creek be accounted for and addressed in the EIR?
Absolutely. Water supply is a really important issue that we'll be discussing in the EIR.
Thank you. And as a dam guy, since I am in charge of the Dam Safety Division, I will also give a plug for what we like to call incidental flood protection. Anytime you have a dam on a creek, it does actually provide downstream flood protection to the downstream community, which is a disadvantaged community in this case. So some of that water, instead of flowing down the creek in large rushes and flooding the area, will actually be discharged in a more controlled manner to help with some of the flooding. So that's an extra added benefit of the project that I believe Ryan covered, but just wanted to stress that as well. Okay, looking for, there you go. Mary has a question for us. Will the Pacheco conduit also need to be upgraded and assessed as part of the EIR? Todd, would you like to address that?
Sure. Well, the project will be connecting into the Pacheco conduit as part of the proposal, and any associated impacts with that part of the project will be evaluated in the document itself.
Thank you, Todd. I'd also like to say that the Pacheco conduit itself will not need to be upgraded. The existing infrastructure is in place there and is actually in fairly good shape. We did have a incident at the Pacheco conduit way back in, I believe, 2016 or 2017, 2018, where there was a pipe failure. So we've actually gone back in there, done a full inspection, and retrofitted that portion to strengthen it up. So we don't anticipate any additional improvements to the Pacheco conduit. Question from Patrick Ferraro. Can you also store state water project water in Pacheco Reservoir? I'm going to give that at first to Ryan.
Yeah, so as you know, the San Luis Reservoir stores both state water project and federal CVP water. However, Valley Water only has regular rights to use the Pacheco conduit for CVP water through its importing. There are special contracts that can be arranged to move state water project water through the Pacheco conduit, but that is not really being modeled as a regular use. But I suppose in an emergency, we could breach that topic.
Thank you, Ryan. I think you're absolutely correct. Right now, the Pacheco conduit is only used to provide Central Valley or CVP water back and forth. But in an emergency, we could always ask the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation for a deviation or exception to transfer state water. So the potential does exist to put state water in the reservoir. I'd like to point out that all of the water being placed in the reservoir from San Luis is part of Valley Water's original allotment. There's no new water being taken from anywhere, up in the Delta or anything. This is the allotment that we already have. It's just a place to put it when we have extremely wet years and we'd actually lose it. So this way we are just making better use of the water that we do have. Any other questions coming up? Let's see, give someone a chance to type something in if they so choose. You will have another opportunity, of course, during the open house period. We'll have some set questions, kind of take surveys to kind of give you a jumping off point, but everything's fair game in that section. So even if we do close this section out and move to the open house, no worries. There is still a chance to ask additional questions. Not seeing any questions right now. So I may go ahead and transition over to the open house portion, and you guys won't have to hear me talk anymore because Albert will be emceeing that. Okay, so thanks everyone for the questions about the scoping presentation and process. I'd like to hand the meeting off to Albert, who will be your host for the open house, and then we'll go from there.
Thank you, Chris. We're going to take a virtual walk over to the open house portion of our event tonight. I'm going to change my background here without my computer crashing. Okay, here we go. Thank you. All right, so I will also be sharing my screen as well. So tonight's portion is to emulate what would have been a in-life event. So in normal times, we would be having a scoping meeting where you hear about the project itself, but you also have an opportunity to ask questions. Imagine if you were to be in a room with staff having different boards, and you can be asking about various topics of our staff. The way to emulate that for tonight, we're actually going to be asking some Zoom poll questions. Following those questions, we'll open the floor for discussion and some feedback from everyone here tonight. You will have an opportunity to ask questions. You can also ask some questions that may have been covered earlier during the scoping meeting presentation if you want to. And at the end of the questions, if you didn't get a chance to ask that question, feel free to also do that then. We'll also be asking 6 specific questions. So going too fast there. One of them is about the project benefits. We'll also ask the concerns that you may have about the project. We'll also be covering potential recreation activities that the project may or may not entail. We'll have a question about the cost impacts about the project. Also a question about support for the project, and then also future approaches to our water supply. And I'm going to move on here to the first question. What you're going to see now is a poll question that's going to pop up on your screen. I need to move some windows around here. So on your screen, you'll have a poll. The question is asking about the proposed expansion of Pacheco Reservoir. It would provide multiple benefits. Which benefits would you support? Please check all that applies. Is it increased water supply reliability, the availability of water during droughts and emergencies, fish habitat improvement in Pacheco Creek, incidental flood reduction for communities along Pacheco Creek, and potential recreation opportunities? I also want to provide this link in our chat box here. We have a Spanish version and an English version. So just give me 1 second as I give you time to answer those. For those also joining us on Facebook, I will also post that link in the comments as well. Just give me 1 second here. It's a bit of a production at times. All right. And I do want to thank for those who are joining us today. We have about 37 people in attendance and also about another 3 or so on Facebook Live. I'm going to end the polling here. We're going to share these results. All right. About 88% of you support increased water supply reliability. Also, 88% of you support the availability of water during droughts and or emergencies. 63% of you support fish habitat improvements along Pacheco Creek. Another 63% in support incidental flooding reduction for communities along Pacheco Creek, and then about 25% support recreational activities. And then about 13% do not support any of the benefits. So I'm going to stop the share of these results. What I'm going to do now is open up the floor for those who want to expand a little further why you may feel one way or the other. These polls give us a little 50-foot view or 50,000-foot view of the community, but we also know that qualitative thoughts on these support or responses may also help staff understand what you may be feeling about your response. All right, get some folks some time here. Feel free to raise your hand or put your comment or question into the Q&A. Give a few seconds here. We do have one coming in. We do have a comment from KI mentioning that the costs are too much for these benefits. Thank you, KI. I'm thinking that that's also caught up from yesterday. Thank you for sharing. And we'll also have an opportunity to share some of that. We do have a project cost question as well later on. All right, seeing that there's no other comments here, I'm going to move on to our next question. All right, these are about concerns that you may have about the project. So you're going to check all that applies. I'm going to launch that poll so you can read along and answer as I also read. So what concerns do you have about the project? Is it the cost of the project, which is estimated at $2.5 billion? Potential impacts to Henry Cole State Park. The expanded reservoir could affect about 20 acres of the 87,000 acre park that's not already accessible to the public. Traffic impacts to 152, I-152 during construction. The amount of water it would provide, would it be too much? The amount of water it would provide, that's not enough. The environmental impacts or other, you can check more than one. And I do know that environmental impacts and other is a little general. And so if you want to share what you may mean, please feel free to do so once I end this poll. We're going to give about another 10 seconds here. And if you stepped away to eat something or use the restroom, please come on back. We're going to give 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Going to share these results here. All right. So about 55% of you do have concerns about the project, which is estimated at $2.5 billion. Another 9% have concerns about the impacts to Henry Cole Park. 36% of you are concerned about traffic on Highway 52. It does back up if you have construction impacts on there. I've sat in traffic once before, or several times before on my way down to Southern California in the past. 9% of you are concerned that it will provide too much water, but 45% of you have more concerns that it would provide not enough water. And then the 55% of our audience have concerns about environmental impacts. I'm going to stop that results there. So this is an opportunity for those who responded to really share more about what you may have concerns with specifically. Feel free to raise your hand. Feel free to enter it into the Q&A. And if you may think of something later on, again, you can also enter it into the SurveyMonkey that's in the chat box as well. And at the end of this webinar, you'll see a prompt window to enter that SurveyMonkey as well. All right, moving along here. I do understand that some of us may have been yesterday. I do see a chat message from Rebecca. She joined a little late, so that's okay. We do this segment and this whole meeting is recorded. She did mention that there are some general concerns about the environment. If you have a little more further to expand about which impacts, is it the impacts of Henry Cole Park or just about the dam itself, please feel free to raise your hand or put it into the Q&A. All right, we're gonna move along here to the, oh, I do now see some activity. And please feel free to enter your feedback into the chat and Q&A and raising your hand. I know Chris is also feeling the same way. I'm tired of hearing myself talk at times. All right, Ken asked, does this project capture any additional water not already captured? I'm going to direct that question to Ryan or Chris.
Yeah, I can take that one. Yeah, with the larger dam and the larger storage capacity, the watershed will be able to be contained more in large storms. So yeah, it would capture more water than it currently does. I think, as you know, Mr. Lawler, the current dam does spill in wet years quite often after it fills up. And then as we talk about the CVP and the water delivery from San Luis Reservoir, as Chris mentioned earlier, one of the advantages would be to put water that would otherwise not be able to be used by Valley Water, like we have nowhere to put it in county, but we could put that excess water into the expanded reservoir as well.
All right, thank you so much. Let's see here. Rebecca had a follow-up chat message about environmental impacts. So she asked, what environmental impacts are anticipated? What has the agency done to mitigate? And I imagine that's going to be hashed out as part of the EIR process. But I think Ryan or Todd, who wants to chime in for that?
Yeah, we listed several different impacts categories that we're going to be assessing in the EIR. I don't suppose maybe if we have time at the end, I could go back and reopen up the presentation, but you can also find those bulleted lists on our website at valleywater.org/Pacheco expansion. You can view those slides and look at the different impacts that we will be assessing.
Great, thank you. And for those who may be curious about why I'm wearing a mask, I'm currently at Valley Water facilities to keep with our safety health protocols for the county. I am wearing a mask in case there are others around me. I usually do this stuff at home at times to do the meetings, but today I am at campus for some peace and quiet because there are some noises of the pandemic around me at home. All right, moving on to the next question here. Question from Mary Morse. How long will construction last? And then I may tack on a question to that. How long will the impacts to Highway 152 be occurring as well? So let's go, Ryan.
Yeah, I can take that one. Currently, the project schedule is looking at major construction beginning in 2025. And depending on the different alternatives that we're assessing, the construction period is 5 to 8 years. And I think it's safe to assume the peak of that, probably the middle 3 to 4 years, would be when there would be the most traffic added to Pacheco Pass Highway for construction vehicles and deliveries.
Great, thank you, Ryan. And let's see here. Feel free to keep those questions coming. I do have a few already here in the Q&A box. This is your chance to ask our very expert staff and knowledgeable panelists as well. Patrick asked here, he's got a question. Does the cost consider opportunity cost as it relates to also building a potable reuse project? This may be a higher level question beyond project staff. Maybe Chris, you want to tackle that?
Sure. So in terms of opportunity cost, there's no exclusion from doing both projects at this point in time. Our board is obviously considering a suite of projects to meet the future demands of our county and our constituents. But right now, there is no opportunity cost associated with doing Pacheco. Everything is in our CIP already moving forward, both the potable reuse project and the Pacheco Reservoir Expansion. So no opportunity cost as of noted yet.
And for those unfamiliar with potable reuse, it means recycle and purify water. All right. KI just had a comment about the initial study should have some discussion of impacts. I'm imagining the initial study for this project. All right.
Yeah, thank you for that. It does.
All right, moving on to our next question here. We're gonna also launch another poll. Give me 1 second. This next question topic is about recreation. I'm gonna launch it just right now. Just so many windows open on my end. All right, so if it's possible to include as part of projects, what types of recreation activities would you like to see at the reservoir? Please check all that apply. Is it hiking or trails? Is it fishing? Would you like to see some boating opportunities? Is camping something that you like to see as well? Do you enjoy equestrian / horse riding? Or are you not particularly interested in recreation at a particular reservoir? Or do you prefer any other types of public access or recreation as well? I myself enjoy hiking and would like to see that on all projects when possible. We're going to give folks a few moments here to enter their response. Another 5 seconds here. All right, I'm going to end this poll. We're going to share these results so you can see how it kind of came down. Very interesting. We have a different response level compared to yesterday's meeting. So most folks here are not particularly interested in recreation at Pacheco Reservoir. I think there's a strong support of the water supply and the emergency supply during a drought emergency, as earlier on the questions asked. So the other folks who did support some level of recreation supported hiking at 20%, fishing at 20%. Sorry, I forgot to mention the not interested in recreation is at 70% for those joining us on Facebook Live. And then for boating and camping are also at 10%. I'm going to stop the share results here. This is an opportunity for those who responded to share a little more about their thought process. It may be that you don't necessarily don't support recreation, you just have other concerns that are higher than others. Please feel free to enter them into the Q&A. Raise your hand to share a verbal comment or into the chat box. All right, let's give about 5 seconds here. Any opportunity? 4, 3, 2, and 1. We're going to move on here during our open house segment. All right, going to throw up the poll on your screens. Ooh, wrong one, sorry. Ignore that. This is related to project costs. So we're going to launch this poll. So I'm going to read you a statement about some context first before you answer. The current projected cost of Pacheco Reservoir Expansion Project is about $2.5 billion. Valley Water received $496.6 million in provisional funding from the state under the Water Storage Investment Program, and is exploring additional funding sources and potential cost sharing with partners. Any gap will be made through water rates. Please note, Valley Water is the county's primary water wholesaler. Unless you're a private well owner, future changes to the rates will be determined by your water retailer. Please select the statement you agree with the most, and that's on your screen. Would you support a $1 to $5 increase in your monthly bill to fund Pacheco, $6 to $10, $11 to $15, $16 to $20, or you would not support any increase at all? And give everyone some time here to answer these poll questions. Another 10 seconds. All right, last opportunity and end this polling here. All right. So in terms of the responses here, it seems that 40% of you would not support any increase in your water bill. About 20% of you may support a $1 to $5 increase. Another 20% a $6 to $10 increase, while another 20% $11 to $15 increase. And then no one supported a $16 to $20 increase. I know that we did share results. How about that? All right, so just so you can see what that looks like on the screen. So again, just to reiterate, 40% no support for any increase, 20% $1 to $5 increase, another 20 $6 to $10 increase, another 20 $11 to $15, and there's no support for a $16 to $20 increase in your monthly bill. I'm going to stop the share of these results here. We're going to ask that for those who may want to share a little further about why you may have chosen the answer you have, feel free to enter it into the Q&A or raise your hand. All right. Seeing that there's none, we're going to move along here. And if you have a response that you may think of later on, it's not too late to put it into the Q&A for any of the other questions or any questions you may have had during the scoping presentation portion of tonight's meeting. All right, we're going to move along here to our next question. This is about support on the project. I'm going to launch this poll. This is about selecting the state you agree with the most. Do you strongly support the proposed expansion of Pacheco? Or do you have some support, but not necessarily strong support? You do not support the proposed expansion, or you're strongly opposed to the expansion of Pacheco Reservoir. Apologies, I forgot to read the statement on our slide here. So as you answer these poll questions, I do want to read this out loud. The increased storage capacity at Pacheco will nearly equal the capacity of Valley Water's 10 other reservoirs. The project will also reduce the frequency and severity of water shortages during drought, protect our drinking water supply, and infrastructure, and improve habitat for fish. Again, go ahead and please select the statement you agree with the most. And read them earlier to you as well. And for those who are in tune with our current news, there is a dry season this year, and we may be heading, or we actually are heading to a drought. So just something to keep in mind as well. I'm gonna give another 5 seconds here before I end the poll. 4, 3, 2, and 1. I'm gonna share these results. All right, about 46% of you do strongly support the expansion of Pacheco Reservoir. Another 23% support, not as strongly, but still support. There doesn't seem to be any do not support of the expansion. There are some of you who are strongly opposed to the expansion, about 23%. And then 8% of you do not know enough to make a decision. I think you may be waiting to see possibly the EIR report or just to learn more about the project itself. All right, I'm gonna stop to share the results here. Please feel free to provide some extra color to your response through the Q&A or chat box. Again, you can also raise your hand. I know this is a very rare opportunity to really talk to staff directly. In normal times, you would have them standing next to a station to answer any questions you may have. So this is a good opportunity to do that. I'm thinking some of you may be cooking dinner or having to juggle some kids right now. So we do appreciate your time tonight and joining our meeting. Okay. Moving on to our final question before we open up the rest of the floor tonight about any topic you may want to ask about. I'm going to launch that final poll here. This is about what to do in the future. And I do know there was a question about potable reuse, so that's on there. So the question is, or the polling question is, check all the statements you agree with. What should Valley Water pursue? Should Valley Water pursue partnering with agencies on regional water supply projects that strengthen the reliability of our water supply? Local multi-benefit water storage projects like Pacheco, improving our water supply reliability through sustainable use of recycled and purified water, conservation, and reducing our water use. So it's a multiple choice. You can check as many as all that you agree with. Give everyone some time here. All right. Check on little Timmy or little Pam there in case they're running through around the living room, harming your furniture or harming themselves potentially or potentially. All right, we're gonna give another 5 seconds. I'm sure many of you are hearing me talk on our virtual meeting, so please feel free to raise your hand and express your thoughts on how you responded. All right, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. We're gonna share these results here. All right, seems to be some equal support for multiple of these statements here. About 70% of you support partnering with agencies on regional water supply projects that strengthen our reliability of the water supply. About 55% support local multi-benefit water storage projects such as Pacheco. Another 73% support the water supply reliability through sustainable use of recycled and purified water. And another 73% support conservation and reducing reducing our water use. I'm going to stop the share results here. All right. Please feel free to enter any further thoughts you may have about your response for this question. Even other questions that may have gone up before, you may have marinated on a response or have a certain position you want to share. It's just the forum to do it. We do have our board members here, of course, that they're having a ready and open ear to listen to feedback, as well as project staff. You can also raise your hand to provide any response as well. I check the participants here. I do not see any raised hands. It's quite possible a lot of the folks are also may have had their questions asked and answered at yesterday's meeting as well. So we do appreciate for those who are joining us again tonight. Seeing that there's none, any questions you have about anything about the project, this is your opportunity to do and ask that. We're going to leave the floor open here just for a little bit. I'm going to stop my screen share so you can see more of our screens as well. Oh, I see a chat question and response here from Rebecca. It's great to be proactive about infrastructure. I'm glad it's moving forward. Thank you for the information. Thank you, Rebecca, for your comment, and thank you for also joining us tonight as well. We do have a question in the Q&A. George asked, what do your models suggest will be the percentage of water that will, on average, come from the local watershed versus imported water from the San Luis Reservoir? I'm gonna ask that first portion first before I ask the rest of them. So I'm gonna direct that to Chris or Ryan.
Thank you, Albert. So the model is very much based on precipitation, and in the face of climate change, precipitation has become very much a hit or miss science these days. So for example, if we had 2017 repeating itself, the reservoir will be completely filled just from the flows that would come from the natural watershed. 2018 was a little more of it was a wet year above normal. On average, if we had 2 of those years back to back, then we'd be able to fill the reservoir with our the local runoff supplies. So it really depends on the precipitation events. Obviously, once the reservoir actually goes into service, it'll depend on the climate at that point. If we're in a prolonged drought, then all of the filling of the reservoir will most likely be through imported supplies, which we're banking every year as we see if there's anything extra. So unfortunately, can't tell you on average just because of, over a 10-year period, it fluctuates greatly. But that's kind of in a nutshell, the general answer. In terms of will the planned increase in the height of the San Luis Dam, so that's a BF6 dam, expansion of that reservoir significantly reduce how often there is no place to store all of Valley Water's allocation from the CBP without construction of Pacheco Reservoir. So in general, Valley Water always has a place to store its water year over year. The issue comes in wet years that we're unable to keep our allocation. Generally in a wet year, all of our local reservoirs are full as well as San Luis Reservoir. And in that case, the demands of the area don't allow us to basically use all that water before some of it spills over San Luis Reservoir. In this case, BF-CISC raise would help to offset some of that, but there's still scenarios in which we would actually spill more than we can even contain within San Luis Reservoir with the BF-CISC raise. Now, part of that will depend specifically on which CVP contractors actually participate in the raise. The additional allocation of space is probably going to be directly proportional to the participants. So if Valley Water participates at a certain level, we may get additional storage. But if we, because we are both state and federal contractors, let's say that we were participating at a level that wasn't analogous to the other CVP contractors, if they participated more, the amount of storage or additional storage that we got could be diminished, and we might not actually have enough to store all of our additional water in any given year. So a lot of it depends on circumstance at the time, the precipitation for the year, and who's already storing water in there. So long answer to your question, sorry about that.
Thank you, Chris. Our next question here comes from Katja, or KI. What is the status of applying for water rights to get the water from Pacheco Creek? Up to either Ryan or Chris.
I can take that one, Chris. Yeah, we have started conversations with the water boards. We haven't completed an application yet at this time, but we are working out the details and having those discussions.
All right, thank you, Ryan. George has another question here. Again, for those who may have some other questions, feel free to raise your hand, ask your question verbally, chat box, or the Q&A box. And for those joining on Facebook Live, you can also enter your question in the comment box, and we'll jump that into the meeting as well. George asks, I don't recall ever hearing anything about hydroelectric power generation in connection with this project. Is it clearly infeasible or uneconomical for these types of projects?
So in general for this, I'll jump in, Ryan. In general for this type of project, it's more uneconomical more than anything else, mainly because this is an emergency storage supply. So the water is actually supposed to be there for when you're in a drought, right? So the best way to get to a hydroelectric power is to constantly discharge water through your turbines and dump it back into the grid. Valley Water actually does have an existing hydroelectric facility at our Anderson Dam reservoir. That's our largest reservoir, provided the Pacheco hasn't been constructed yet. And that hydro facility was built a number of years ago, and actually just recently our board looked at the cost benefit of that and found that it didn't make economic sense to keep that hydro facility going. It actually costs us more than the energy that's generated in order to use that hydro facility. So just as general, it doesn't seem as though we have the right type of reservoir and the right type of use to really benefit from hydroelectric power.
Great, thank you. And thank you, George, for your question. Again, feel free to put in your questions on the Q&A or chat or raising your hand. We do have staff here available to answer any questions you may have about the project. And I do know that we still have some board members here as well. If you also would like to make some comments, Director Varela or Santos, feel free to as well.
As Richard Santos here, I just want to say thank you for the great presentation. I think it's a great education. I think we have some great questions. We have some things that we have to find out a little bit more about. But everybody's working very hard to making sure we have reliable water, and appreciate what all the work you're all doing. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you, Director Santos. And then Director Varela, I see you also unmuted as well.
Yeah, I just want to thank all the public for participating tonight. It's important to get your input and your point of view. I mean, we're doing all of this work for you. So it's important to hear your comments and your issues and concerns that you may have. So thank you for participating tonight. And also to our incredible staff. They just know all the answers, which is really important and very terrific. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Director Varela. And then we have just one final comment from George, just thanking us for our thoughtful answers. And again, thank you for those joining us tonight. I know coming straight from work and taking care of the family at home, it could be sometimes daunting to have to jump into another Zoom meeting. So again, we appreciate your presence and your thoughts. All right, looking like there's no other questions, comments, raise hands. I'm gonna hand the floor back to Chris.
Let me unmute myself. Thank you so much, Albert. I'd like to thank everybody for participating and joining us, and basically thank staff for participating as well. Ryan, Todd for answering questions, Mason for being so patient over the last 2 days and waiting for a question to come your way. Sorry, we just kept you waiting there. I'd like to thank all three directors who participated, Vice Chair Director Kremen, Director Richard Santos, and Director John Varela, as well as all of our communication staff who put this together. And Albert, especially, a big kudos to you. You run these things fabulously. So just a reminder that we will post this to our website. Ryan's presentation is already up there. I don't think last night's meeting is up there, but we'll have both last night's and tonight's meeting up on our website for viewing. We do have quite a bit of presentations that go on at various points. Most of them are open to the public, but if you miss any for any reason, they're always posted on the website, valleywater.org/Pacheco expansion. With that said, I wish everyone a safe and good rest of your night.
Thank you all for joining us.